what if the key to beating narcissism or personality disorders or improving wasn't in a pill, wasn't in talking, wasn't in thinking, but was on your plate? Imagine ditching carbs and going full carnivore. Could this really transform your mental health? That's what I want to jump into today. Before we go on, make sure you subscribe, thumbs up, like, comments, so forth. What's working for you, what's not. Okay, so I wanted to get into this topic. It's a little off course from a lot of the stuff that we do on the channel, but not exactly. And here's why. And a lot of the comments I get from you guys, I love, by the way, so keep them coming. People wonder, how did I start this journey of waking up to my narcissism? Like, how did that occur? So people who are suffering from narcissism in their lives wonder this, but more so it's the loved ones of the people with NPD that are asking me this question because they are having some suffering or some dissatisfaction in their lives and their relationship with the narcissist. And their hope is that that person will start to wake up to what's going on. And that way they can at least face it head on, maybe have better lives, more satisfying relationships, and etc. And so I've really been giving that some thought. And I've answered that in some of my other videos and some of the stories and considerations and how it occurred and all of that kind of stuff. But another piece, which I think is really interesting, or at least it is to me, and maybe to you guys, is how some things that don't have anything to do with our thinking or talking or anything like that can actually impact. So now, if you know anything about my story or who I am, I've been in the natural health field for over 20 years. I'm a practicing chiropractor. I love nutrition and so forth. And one of the things I've always done in that is learn new things. And then I'm kind of like a scientist. So I experiment on myself. I've tried all kinds of eating styles and diets. I've been vegetarian, I've been vegan, I've done paleo, I've done raw foods, etc., etc. And in the last about 3.5 years, the most significant dietary change I made was I decided to try out the carnivore diet, or at least the meat-based diet. Now, you may or may not know much about that, and I'll tell you a little bit more as we go forward. But one of the things that was really interesting to me is, as I've been on this journey about learning about narcissism, how the brain works, mental health, and these kind of things, I kept running across people talking about studies that showed carnivore or ketogenic, which carnivore is under the umbrella of ketogenic diets, and how much improvement people were seeing in all kinds of mental health challenges from making these nutritional or dietary changes. So I decided, that's interesting. I wonder if that's part of it for me. Now, the timing doesn't exactly line up. I didn't start this journey till about a little less than 2 years ago, but sometimes, and it actually has made me wonder how much of my openness and my ability to start to explore these things within myself and make changes has to do with the fact that I got my nutrition in a way that makes my body and my brain work in the most, gives my brain the most potential to be able to kind of break out of the cage of NPD or narcissist personality disorder. So a little bit of background: ketogenic diet, which, like I said, carnivore ends up falling under. That's not why I did it. Though I have done a keto diet in the past. I didn't mention that before. And I wasn't going for that as much as just what I had learned about all the benefits people were finding from carnivore diet, and I wanted to try it. And I will tell you, out of all those things I've tried, personally, I've felt the best on the carnivore diet in terms of just my daily function and a number of other stuff. And I can talk more about that if you guys are interested too. I'm happy to tell you my personal experience, but in terms of like how I feel, my body, and all the lab tests I've done and seeing the improvements. But what I really want to focus on here is there are actually quite a few studies that show these type of eating benefits to all kinds of mental health challenges. So if you don't know, a ketogenic diet is like a high fat, very, very low carbohydrate diet. And I don't want to get into the real particulars. You can look that up. It's everywhere. But basically, ketogenic means, like I just said, you're eating a lot of fat, you're eating a moderate amount of protein, and an extremely low amount of carbohydrates. And the ketone, or the keto part of the name, what that's pointing at is that your body changes its metabolic fuel from carbohydrates to what are called ketones, which is what your body creates out of the fat in the diet and fat stored in your body. then your brain in particular, but other parts of your body use those ketones for fuel. And there's a lot of benefits that have been seen over the years for people who are using ketosis or ketones for fuel. Some of the earliest research I saw was with epilepsy and seizure disorders from as far back as the 50s, seeing significant improvements in seizure disorders with a ketogenic diet. So that was where some of the researchers started to look at, okay, so this is affecting brain function because seizures are brain issues. Maybe it can benefit other things. And so that's what a ketogenic diet is. And carnivore falls into that because carnivore diet, basically what you're eating is only animal foods. So no vegetables, a strict carnivore diet, no vegetables, no fruits, no grains, nothing but meat and meat products. I am a little bit modified. I do eat a tiny bit of fruit personally, but 95% of everything I eat is meat, and mostly red meat, beef primarily, a little bit of lamb, tiny bit of pork, tiny bit of seafood, but pretty much that. Oh, and duck eggs. So it ends up being ketogenic because you're eating very low carbs. And to feel good and function well on a carnivore diet, it has to be a relatively high amount of fat too, because if you're not getting carbs, because you're not eating any carbohydrate foods, you need something to give you that energy, and protein by itself doesn't do a good job without that fat. So that's the deal. Now, hopefully you get the basics of what I'm talking about here. And I'm going to look at my notes here because I found a bunch of studies out there. So a lot of them are case studies, and that makes sense because large-scale nutritional studies are challenging and so forth. So as far back as 1965, there was a case study where a group of women were given a ketogenic diet, and problems like depression and anxiety improved over, I think it was a 12-week period of time. There was a 2009 case where there was a 7-year-old individual who was suffering with a significant amount of hallucinations, schizophrenia, that switched to ketogenic, and that cleared up completely. There was another study in 2022 with a 43% remission rate for changing to ketogenic diet for people with schizophrenia. And so, even to the degree that one patient went from paranoid delusions to total clarity just by switching their diet to eating only meat. What else we got here? So there was a study in 2022 about major improvements with major depressive disorder and anxiety. There was also a 2020 carnivore study where 95% improvement in mood and clarity. So thousands of people are reporting ditching their medication even for anxiety and depression after switching to carnivore or a ketogenic diet. Now, why would this make such a difference? And like I mentioned, the difference with a ketogenic diet versus a carbohydrate-based diet is the energy source. Your body creates ketones, and that's what your brain now uses for its fuel rather than sugar. And it does a number of things, but one of those, or a couple of those, is that it reduces overall inflammation, especially in the nervous system. It boosts a substance called GABA, which is important for the proper function of your brain, and it improves your insulin sensitivity, which is also a huge key to proper brain function, especially as we age. Now, here's the truth. There's no direct studies on narcissist personality disorder, so the things like grandiosity, lack of empathy, etc., or other cluster B personality disorders, which narcissism falls under the classification of, so things like borderline, etc., that I found. However, since these diets help with emotional regulation and other things like bipolar and depression, which they have studied directly, it's likely that they increase ease and impulsivity and mood in borderline personalities and narcissism. And as your brain functions better, you have the best chance to really get a hold of sort of those unconscious programs. And if you've listened to any of my other videos, you'll understand that a lot of the narcissistic behavior can actually be tracked back to a high level of anxiety. And so if that improves generally across the board with a ketogenic and a carnivore diet, we can make a logical assumption that that's going to improve in the narcissist too. And if the anxiety isn't running you as much as it would have been previously on like a standard American diet, it only makes sense that that would allow you to have a better chance of really getting a hold of the behaviors and starting to really create a life that works for you. So hopefully this makes a little sense. it's hard for me to draw a direct correlation because of the timing, and it wasn't what I was looking at the time, certainly, because 3 years ago, when I switched to a carnivore diet, I didn't even know that I had a narcissist personality disorder. So it wasn't my goal. But as I've really considered that question that I've gotten quite a bit of, how did I get to this point where I started looking at these things? And sometimes it's not even a question. Sometimes it's a comment like, oh, you must not be a narcissist because narcissists can't look at themselves. Totally not true. That piece about narcissists can't look at themselves. There are countless others of us out there that are on this journey of trying to understand how their brain works and be able to have a more satisfying, functional life with narcissism. So, from schizophrenia, remissions to mood boost, keto and carnivore are actually shaking up a lot of the mental health world. But NPD research is really kind of the next big thing. I hope that people start looking into that because it could make a big difference. And NPD, or narcissist personality disorder, is one of the most widespread mental health or cluster B personality disorders out there. And I think if we can find ways to attack it from all different angles, so a lot of the stuff we've covered on this channel, understanding yourself, looking at patterns, understanding where it's all coming from, all that's super vital. But why not give yourself the best chance, the best support you can, even in the biological sense of what you eat? So of course, not medical advice, learn about these things, talk to your healthcare provider, whatever, all that kind of good stuff. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you what I found when I started looking into the research about it and what I found in my own experience in terms of, my own health. And I will say a little bit more in terms of what I've experienced with the carnivore diet is that my energy levels and my mood levels are much more stable throughout the day, not as much peaks and valleys. And I think that helps, especially in those challenging moments where my patterns of narcissism get the most sort of poked at or triggered or challenged, that my energy level, my mood, my brain function is steady and not like in a dip or peaks and dips. Then I have the best chance of catching myself in advance of some of the behaviors that I'm looking to change, and or a better chance to review them afterwards and start making those changes. All right, hopefully this was interesting. Drop some comments below, make sure you subscribe, give some thumbs up, and if you like these kind of videos that are about a little bit different than just thinking about narcissism, talking about it, what other things maybe I do in my life, other things that you guys do that also are supportive of health in general, but mental health and particularly narcissism, let me know, because I'm happy to talk more about it if you guys are interested. All right, you take